only ever felt emotionally like connected to one other piece, but I did sell it and I felt happy about where it went. It's gonna look so cool.
What makes a piece of furniture timeless? Is it the name of the designer who made it? Is it the materials and techniques used to produce it? Or is it the era the piece was made itself and how it relates to the contemporary? No one can know for certain, but here at Auld, we believe that it is the story, and there is perhaps not a better example of this principle of concept than the project we have in our studio today. This is one of a pair of antique French leather club chairs that we received from a local art collector after their dog decided to chew up the original leather on the chair's armrests. Horrified by this sight, they reached out to us to assess the damage, and after learning how arduous and difficult the project was going to be, they graciously passed the pair of chairs into our care for restoration. This chair was made sometime in the 1940s in Paris, in what collectors refer to as the mustache chair, owed in full to the mustache-style silhouette on the chair's backrest. These chairs were deliberately crafted with a streamlined Art Deco style, typically seated low to the ground with a reclining posture that makes it almost necessary to sink into its puffy arms and thick cushion. Now, what might explain a good amount of this chair's heritage and iconography is just how well built they were. Made of fine sheepskin or calf hide, these chairs impart a sense of old world comfort, taking in the character and patina and wear that only generations of use can create. This is what it means to be timeless. Stories that communicate a sense of place and belonging, that elicit a palpable sense of provenance that one can't help but be drawn to. Every crease, every crack, every area of wear and evidence of ownership is a story that tells us just how far a piece has made it, from the time it came into the world to inside of your home. Now, I am really excited to get started on this project. And as difficult as this project is destined to be, this is exactly why I'm in the business of restoration. To take a piece one step removed from the landfill and to bring it back to life for someone else to enjoy and cherish for years to come, I think that's pretty remarkable. Especially in a world of fast fashion and trends, where it seems like companies are making things cheaper and charging more for furniture that just really isn't that good. Luckily for us, we are not totally starting from the ground up on this project. The previous owner, thinking they would recover the entire chair in new leather, actually stripped all the original leather and stuffing from this chair straight down to the bare frame. Now, you may be asking yourself, how is this good news? Well, thankfully, the previous owner saved all the panels of leather they removed from the chairs and included that with the chairs when they delivered them to our workshop. So we will see later just how much of the original leather we can salvage for this project, but we are much happier to have some of the original panels of leather than to be totally starting from scratch, having to cut all new patterns. Now that we have everything we need, we can get started on restoring this chair. We will be using traditional upholstery methods, save for the use of our trusty long-nose staple gun, instead of tacks, and there's a good reason for this. As much as we endorse using traditional methods of restoration in any project, sometimes you have to look at what's best for the piece itself. And after taking a look at this beechwood frame, we noticed there are a lot of tack holes in this frame, not only from the original tradesmen who built this chair, but also from other previous attempts at restoration. The use of staples will now also save myself time, which is always a welcome sight, but also these staples are going to be less invasive as a metal tack, hopefully mitigating the risk of the frame cracking over the next 100 or so years of use. As you just saw there, I went ahead and tied the springs in what upholsterers refer to as an 8-way tie, which not only helps keep the springs oriented just where they should be, but also helps form the base shape of the seat rest. After this, I apply a heavy burlap to cover the springs, using upholstery twine to secure the burlap to the springs, as well as create some baling loops that will help us hold the cushion material, which is coconut fiber, in place. This coconut fiber, or core fiber, is imported to us directly from England, and it is at this point I'm going to begin the shape of this chair, which will influence how the leather lays onto the silhouette of the chair when we get to that stage. Just now I packed a lot of coconut fiber really tightly into the nose of that chair, and what this does is it allows us to build up a really strong nose to the front of this seat. After this, we're going to use our upholsterer's needle to stitch through this burlap and really start to build up the chair's nose. What we're looking for is a firm 90-degree angle to the front of this chair, so that when the leather is placed on this part of the chair, the leather doesn't buckle when the chair is sat on. And as you can probably tell, this is not a quick job. It takes a lot of patience and focus to build the seat up properly. So this is the moment I like to listen to music or throw on a podcast, anything really to help the time go by easier. Now, I like to listen to true crime podcasts, especially ones about historical crimes. I don't know what it is about them really, but it just gets me in the mood to work on an old project like this one. And I think what's really cool about times like this is it gives you an opportunity to really just focus and kind of meditate when you're working on kind of a tedious part of a project. It kind of helps you put everything in a frame of mind, and helps you see a bigger picture. And what I'm doing here is I'm putting a row of stitches through the nose of this chair. And what this does is it helps keep everything in place, but also it's helping us form this really nice flat front to this chair. So when we put on the edge roll and ultimately put on the batting and the leather, it's going to give a really nice straight, flat appearance and keep the leather from buckling when the chair is sat in. Luckily for us, the previous owner saved the original edge roll that was made for this chair, which was great because making edging like this is really an art form more than anything. And as much experience as I have in the past decade of restoration, it is a bit above my skill level, so we are happy to be able to use it for this project. What I'm marking out here in the seat pan is going to act as a stitching guide for us as we use our double-sided upholsterer's needle to go through this top burlap layer all the way back down to the springs before bringing it back up. Like we've done already, this is just an added layer of protection to keep the stuffing in place, as well as take the rounded profile of the cushions and form a firm, flat surface for us to rest the cushion on. When I bring this needle down through the seat, I'm being extra careful to navigate around the twine that we've already placed in the seat around the springs, because if I pierce through one of those, it could cause problems down the line. And right now I'm really just concerned with getting this form and this frame kind of filled out with these stitches, because I'm going to come back through later and really tighten all of these down and make sure everything stays nice and neatly in place. Now here, I'm paying extra care to close up this corner neatly. This doesn't make the chair any more comfortable or the end product look any cleaner, but in 50, 60, 70 years, when a future conservator opens up this chair, I want them to see that this piece has been cared for. And more than that, it's just my own personal signature I would like to pass forward to whomever owns this chair next. Here I am starting to place that coconut fiber onto the arms of this chair. And the really cool thing about this part of the project is this is when the chair truly begins to take shape and actually begin to look like something you can sit in. And furthermore, this is the part where the true art of shaping things like these arms come into play. If one arm has too much stuffing and looks larger or puffier than the other, or if the distribution of the fiber is uneven, that is all going to translate to the end look of this chair and look pretty unsightly. So in this part, it is super critical for me to ensure that the balance and appearance of this chair looks just right. Now, I'm going to come back through with my needle, and just like I did on the seat pan, I'm going to put a layer of stitching inside of this armrest. Now what this does, just like with the seat, is it's going to give a little bit of stability and structure to this armrest, as well as make sure all of that stuffing we just shaped inside of there is going to stay in place. When you think about it, an arm is going to get used a lot on this chair, so we need to make sure it's not going to get compressed or misshapen over time. After we've got the stuffing placed onto the chair, it is finally beginning to look like a proper club chair again, and it is exactly this type of morale booster a project like this is full of. Before we can get started on the exciting part, the leather work, we need to cover the entire chair in a layer of cotton batting, because as much shape and structure as that burlap gives the chair, it's not really soft, and this batting evens out all of those uneven surfaces and acts as a nice, soft interface between the burlap and the leather, and will provide a lot of comfort to the end user. And this chair is only one of 2 chairs, so everything you're seeing me do here, I actually have to do twice. With the form of this chair complete, it's now time for us to pivot our attention to the leather. Luckily, we have quite a few of the original panels of leather that we will be able to utilize for this project, and I always recommend that you use original parts when you can, because especially with these chairs, they're only original once, and when you take apart or throw away the worn and weathered appeal of this chair, if you're not careful, you can lose a lot of what made these chairs unique. The chairs need to be comfortable, yes, but over generations of use, of patina, and character, these chairs are more like a fine oil painting than they are simply just a chair. When this chair came in, the leather that came off of it was old, stiff, and fragile. So, before we can even attempt to put this leather on the chair, we need to do some work to stabilize and replenish the oils and bring some semblance of softness back to this antique leather. Now with these chairs, often being constructed out of aniline leather, we like to use a multi-stage process to degrease and cleanse, as well as reintroduce some of those lost fats and oils into the top grain. We get our leather care kits from Leather Doctor, a company based out of Canada, and couldn't recommend them enough. And with their kit, this leather has gone from near dry rot to soft and pliable, and is going to allow us to place it under the strain needed to stretch it over the frame. Now, you might be surprised with just how much dirt and grime we're pulling off of this old leather. And even if your chair is not this old, but a 5, 10, 15-year-old leather chair, we definitely recommend getting it cleaned, because you would probably be surprised and a little bit horrified to see how much dirt can come off of a chair. Now that we're letting the old leather sit, it's time for us to work on getting some new panels made. If you remember, this chair was a chew toy for a little bit, so as long as we wish we could use all of the original pieces, we need to replace some of the damaged or destroyed sections of leather. This is new leather from Moore & Giles, a leather tannery based out of England, and it's really just a beautiful, fine leather. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of obsessed with this leather. I mean, it's a really fine, beautiful, amazing leather, but aside from that, it just smells really good. It has that really nice kind of leathery saddle smell, that kind of old European leathery smell, and I just find myself smelling it like I would like a bag of coffee beans. What I'm doing here is I'm marking out a pattern in this new leather that's going to act as a replacement for some of the panels on the chair. And as you can see, it's a little bit of an art form because we don't always have a complete panel to work with. So I have to rely a lot on experience and my knowledge of the chair and upholstery itself to make sure that I cut out a pattern that's going to work. This is the original back panel, and as you can see, the tacks that were used to apply this leather to the back of the chair tore really big holes in the edges, so we're going to need to make a new one. And a trick I have for this kind of cut is only to cut out half. That way you get a perfectly mirrored cut and aren't relying on the warped pattern of the original. And don't worry, as even though this leather won't work for the back panel, we can actually use this leather for the replacement side panels. This is really the whole point of what we do, is finding ways to make sure this piece is as original as possible. And anytime we have an opportunity to save or salvage an original piece of this chair, we're going to use it. Now, there's a quote I've heard said by Julian from Baumgartner Restoration, and it's that you never actually own a fine watch. You merely look after it for the next generation. And in a lot of the projects we work on, this is really the sentiment we're trying to achieve. Because as much of a burden as it is to work on these chairs right now, it's really important for us to pass this kind of artwork on to different generations. And if we can have a little bit of a part in that, it's really important for us to do so that someone else might enjoy these chairs as much as the many generations that have come previously. In addition to these new leather panels, we also need to cut out new sections of velvet. Now this velvet is great because it's soft and it's replacing that ratty old fabric that was used originally. I mean, comfort is the most important part of any club chair, and believe me, there is nothing worse than sitting in an old chair, reaching under the cushion, and feeling just an old, dirty, gross fabric there. So this needs to get replaced. So while we were working on that, this original leather has had a while to soak in that conditioner that we coated it in, and it's feeling way better than it did when we first got it. And now we can work on addressing the tear here, as well as stabilizing that fragile edge of the back panel. Now, I had this idea to use a water-based adhesive to apply a really thin liner leather to the edges and give it just a little bit more strength and allow us to have a little extra bit of leather to grab as we wrap it around the frame. And although this works in theory, in practice is a different matter entirely, so we'll see how that works out. And this water-based adhesive I'm using has two main benefits. First, it's low VOC, so it's not going to have any noxious chemicals that are emitted during the application process. And secondly, because it's water-based, if someone in the future feels the need to take apart this chair and undo all of the work I've done, they have that ability to do so. With that done, it brings us to one of my favorite parts of the project, where we get to take all of these new and old pieces of leather and fabric and sew it all together. Now, if you're planning on doing this kind of work yourself, I would definitely recommend getting a walking foot or compound feed sewing machine. This leather has a sneaky tendency to slip around, and the walking foot just helps keep all of those layers together. The machine I'm using is a vintage Pfaff model 545-H4, which means it's a heavy-duty industrial machine, and the H4 designation means that the feet lift higher than other machines, and I just can't recommend this machine enough. Pfaff 145, 545, 1245 are all wonderful machines, and if you have a keen eye, you can actually find them for sale for pretty cheap. For $300, $400, you can sometimes find them, and when you get them all oiled up and fixed up, they just last forever. Okay, so with that long sewing machine commercial over, we can finally get to work on putting the leather on this chair. Now we need to hand stitch this nose panel to the burlap underneath this cotton batting, and we do this like we do so many other things in upholstery to ensure that everything stays where it should for the next foreseeable future. It's a tedious task, but these are the kind of steps that we need to follow to ensure a good end product. And now I can finally start to put the leather on this chair. Now this is a slow process like so many others, but I'm just going really slow, taking my time and putting attention towards making sure this leather is pulled tight, is not going to slip or move out of the way, and making sure with the staple gun that it's really secured down tightly and is not going to go anywhere. Now this is a major milestone for this project because this backrest panel is arguably going to be the focal point of this chair. The dark cracks and that beautiful rich patina really tie the chair together, but at the same time, this leather is really old, so we need to be super careful not to get too carried away and accidentally tear or otherwise ruin this panel, which can make this part exciting, but also equal parts stressful. As you can probably tell, this is really honest work. It's not easy wrapping this old leather around the frame to make sure everything lines up as it should. And as much as we've worked on this old leather, it's just not as stretchy as this new leather, meaning you need to line up this leather really carefully to make sure it doesn't look out of place or sloppy. With the backrest now in place, we can get started on the armrests, and I've talked a lot, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick step back. I'm going to let you watch me put together this armrest, and I'll check back with you in a bit. Okay, so now that we're done with the armrests, we can get to work on this crest. Sadly, the original Naga hide piping has become brittle or broken over time, so I'm going to go ahead and make some new piping out of some thin leather. And Naga hide being an early kind of fake leather, this new full leather piping is going to be a bit of an upgrade from the past. With the new piping on, we need to get to work on placing the original leather on this crest. And if you couldn't tell already, these chairs get their nickname of a quote-unquote mustache chair due to the mustache-shaped silhouette on the backrest of these chairs. It's a unique treatment that lends to why these chairs are so desirable, making it ever more important for us to make sure it looks correct. Now, if placing on the backrest was stressful, this is far and away more nerve-wracking than that. Due in part because of the way this panel is placed on is that it's tacked on by its lip upside down and then creased back. And with this leather being this old, it's really likely that the fibers are too far gone and that stress could absolutely tear this panel apart. So a lot of focus, a little bit of luck, and a whole hell of a lot of patience is needed to get this to work. And as I peel this old leather back, I'm going really slow, and I'm paying a lot of attention to how the strain I'm inflicting on this old leather is being responded to, making sure there's no cracks nor tears, and really paying special attention to that French seam in my left hand, because if that fails and this piece tears, we're straight back to square one, and it's going to be a lot of work to replicate this part of the chair in a way that doesn't seem out of place. With that corner done, I can move my attention over to the other corner. Once again, just going really slow, paying attention, listening for any kind of cracks or tears, and making sure this leather gets seated properly and is lined up just as it should be. Now, do you remember what we did with the original backrest on this chair? This is why it's really important to use any of the original pieces you can, because we have this really beautiful rich patina that we're now able to incorporate on the side panels. And what this does is just really make sure all of the panels on this leather tie together, and the one who owns this chair is not losing the forest for the trees and is able to see the total impact this chair has in its original form. Wrapping up the leatherwork on this chair, I am tacking on this new back panel with these decorative French style tacks. This just hides the ugly patchwork of leather and staples on the back and gives the chair a nice fit and finish. What I think is super cool about these pieces is even though they were working on the back, the part of the chair that will be seldom seen, the craftsmen who made these chairs paid a lot of attention to every view, making sure luxury was present in every part of this piece. Okay, so now that the original facades have been tacked onto the chair, we can put on the original cushion and we are... Oh. Oh no. That is not gonna work. We're gonna have to make a new one. Alright, now that we're done with that, let's take a look at this original cushion and see just what we're working with. And? Oh, what's this? It looks like whoever worked on this chair last stopped for a candy break. Now, I can't find anything out about this brand online, so I don't know if it's from the 40s or 50s when this chair was made, but I want to know, have any of you seen this kind of candy before? Now, it looks like we're going to have to repair some of these cracks that are in the seat springs. And this is just one of the parts of any restoration where there's always going to be some kind of unforeseen obstacle or hurdle, and you just need to adapt. We didn't expect to see broken springs in the seat cushion, but luckily we have just the right tools to fix it. Now, if you thought putting foam in modern seat cushions was hard, this is about 10 times worse than that. It is far and away so much more difficult just keeping all of these different pieces in place, taking what seems like a really small cover compared to so much stuffing, and just really trying to wrench it in there, make sure everything looks like it's fit and finished the way it should, and make sure it actually stays closed up. Okay, so with all the leather work done, we just have one last step we need to complete, which is just making sure this new leather matches that really beautiful, rich, antique brown patina of the old leather. And we're going to do that by taking this aniline leather dye and applying it in sparing coats with a microfiber towel. And the key here is to apply it really sparingly, just building up coat after coat and making sure over time you begin to match that really beautiful original patina, that really charming caramel brown of that original leather. And now, with every step of this process completed, after every attention to detail and care for this long forgotten piece, what we're left with is a piece of furniture that is built to last, with all of its narrative embellishments fit for a new chapter, in a piece that we can now say is truly and totally timeless.